After working 20 years as an ER doctor, I've unfortunately had plenty of uncomfortable conversations. Nothing is more difficult than telling someone that their spouse has passed. And amid that grief, the last thing they need is a bigger tax bill and higher healthcare costs. Yet this is exactly what happens. This is what's called the widow's penalty. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how this happens and what you can do about it. Most people think their tax rate is determined by their income, but income is just a part of what determines your tax bill. There's another factor, one that affects everything from wealth building to wealth preservation, not only for widows and widowers, but for divorcees and single retirees as well. Filing status, it's that little box you check, single, married, filing jointly, separately, or head of household. These seemingly practical designations have multiple downstream effects that most people simply don't realize, and it forms the entire basis of the widow's penalty. Most married couples file jointly, and that joint status comes with real financial advantages, bigger tax deductions, wider brackets, and better thresholds across the board. When that status changes with the death of a spouse, the financial impact is significant and it hits multiple areas at once. You can see exactly how this occurs when you look at this, the federal income tax brackets. A couple with a joint income of $100,000 after deductions would fall in the 12% marginal tax bracket, whereas a surviving spouse filing as a single person, even as head of household with the same income, would be in the 22% bracket. But the brackets are just the beginning. This second factor is what truly drives the impact for single filers and explodes their tax bill. The most important lever in reducing taxable income is deductions. Couples filing jointly in 2026 have a standard deduction of $32,200. Both spouses are 65 or older. They may also qualify for an additional senior deduction of $6,000 per person or $12,000 total, depending on their income. But after the death of a spouse, this changes drastically. Standard deduction is cut in half and the senior deduction is phased out at lower incomes. Let me show you exactly how this works. Take John and Susie, both 65, combined income of $100,000, filing jointly. Their standard deduction is $32,000, and the age 65 add-on of $1,650 each, plus the senior deduction of $6,000 each. Their total deductions add up to $47,500. And their taxable income drops from $100,000 to $52,500, giving them a tax bill of just $5,800. Now let's say John passes, and the following year Susie files as single. Her standard deduction drops to $16,100. She still has the 65 plus add-on for one, and then the senior deduction of $6,000 for herself. Total deductions are now $23,750. Her taxable income, $76,250. And now she's pushed into that 22% tax bracket, and her tax bill is $11,497. Susie's life hasn't changed that much in a year. She didn't earn more money, she didn't make a different financial choice, she experienced a loss, and her tax bill nearly doubled. And that's not even the whole story. If Susie has investment income, capital gains from stock sales, or rental income, she might also trigger the net investment income tax at a lower threshold than when she was married. But this next part is what catches homeowners completely off guard. Their biggest asset can become their biggest tax bill. Because here's what most people don't know. When you sell your primary residence, the profit is subject to capital gains tax above a certain amount. Married filing jointly, that exclusion is $500,000. Widowed, divorced, or single, it drops to $250,000. Any profit above that is taxable. Most people think of their home as a savings account that they can cash out when needed. But for a surviving spouse with significant equity, it can become a substantial tax bill. So that's just the tax picture. But taxes are just one part of the widow's penalty. There's another hit that compounds everything we just covered, and most people never see it coming. The loss of a spouse often means loss of income. Married couples often have two incomes, or if retired, two Social Security checks coming in. But when one spouse passes, the surviving spouse is reduced to one check, usually the larger of the two. But it still amounts to less income. And here's what most people don't realize. Up to 85% of your Social Security income can be taxed. For married couples, that taxation on 85% of your Social Security is triggered at $44,000 in combined income. For single filers, it starts at $34,000. So the surviving spouse already dealing with reduced income now has a larger share of their Social Security benefits subject to tax. In addition to all this, surviving spouses are dealing with other expenses that don't drop off. In fact, some essential expenses like this next one go up. If you're over 65 and receiving Medicare, you might think you're home free with healthcare, but that's not the case. Medicare premiums are based on your modified adjusted gross income, and IRMAA, the income-related surcharge, hits single filers at half the threshold that it hits married couples. For married couples filing jointly, IRMAA kicks in at $206,000 in income. For single filers, that threshold drops to $103,000. Retirees who never paid an IRMAA surcharge in their lives can suddenly find themselves paying one, not because their income went up, but because their filing status changed. Medicare is not the only healthcare cost that goes up. If you're under 65 and buying health insurance under the Affordable Care Act, this next part is critical. ACA subsidies are based on your modified adjusted gross income relative to the federal poverty level. When one spouse dies, two things happen. First, taxable income often increases because the surviving spouse files as a single filer with smaller deductions. Second, household size drops from 2 to 1, which lowers the federal poverty threshold. Because of this, the same income now represents a higher percentage of the federal poverty level, which can significantly reduce or eliminate subsidies entirely. Here's what that looks like in real numbers. In 2026, the federal poverty level for one person is $15,960. 400% of that is $63,840. For a two-person household, the federal poverty level is $21,640, and 400% of that is $86,560. That's a $22,000 difference in the income ceiling before subsidies phase out. This means that a surviving spouse can reach those key thresholds at a much lower income and lose those valuable subsidies. Healthcare is one of the key variables that can make or break a retirement plan. That's why I've put together a free healthcare guide specifically for people navigating the gap between retirement and Medicare. Link is below. Now you understand the full extent of the widow's penalty. It's this cumulative effect of all these changes: higher taxes, reduced Social Security benefits, higher Medicare and ACA premiums, all triggered by one life event. So what can you actually do about it? Well, there's no way to fully eliminate the widow's penalty, but there are things you can do to reduce its impact. Most people focus on how to reduce taxes and expenses, but the main lever you have is actually on the opposite side of the equation. Here's what most people don't realize. The IRS doesn't just tax you on all income. It taxes you on taxable income. And understanding that distinction and building your retirement around it is how you change the math. And here are 6 strategies that do exactly that. First is income diversity. Most people have majority of their retirement savings in one place, a tax-deferred account, a 401k or traditional IRA. Every dollar you pull from those accounts is taxable income. For a surviving spouse already sitting in compressed brackets, that's a real problem. But there are 2 other types of accounts that work very differently. First, Roth accounts give you completely tax-free withdrawals. You've already paid taxes on the money going in, so when you take it out, it doesn't count as taxable income at all. That means those withdrawals don't trigger Social Security taxation or bump your healthcare premiums. Next, you have taxable brokerage accounts. These give you a different kind of advantage. When you withdraw from a brokerage account, you're realizing capital gains, not ordinary income. And as a single filer, you can pay 0% on capital gains with up to $49,000 in income. Compare that to the 22% you might pay on the same amount withdrawn from a 401k. The 3 buckets, tax-deferred, Roth, and taxable brokerage, give you the flexibility to pull from whichever source keeps your taxable income lowest in any given year. That flexibility is what lets a surviving spouse stay out of higher tax brackets, income thresholds, and surcharges that make that widow's penalty so damaging. This next strategy is the most powerful tool you have to create more tax-free dollars in retirement. But the key is to use it at the right time. If you're married and retired but not yet receiving Social Security, you have 2 critical advantages working together: lower income and the married filing jointly status. That combination creates a unique window of opportunity to convert traditional IRA money to Roth at lower tax rates, building tax-free income for later years, especially for a surviving spouse. Roth conversions are not the right strategy for everyone, but if you're going to use it, it works dramatically better when both spouses are alive and filing jointly. This next strategy is one of the most underutilized tools in retirement planning, and it's particularly valuable here because it reduces taxes and healthcare costs simultaneously. Health savings accounts offer triple tax advantages. Contributions are tax deductible, Growth is tax-free, and withdrawals for qualified medical expenses are also tax-free. You can use it for out-of-pocket costs like prescriptions and copays, and even COBRA premiums and long-term care insurance. And your surviving spouse inherits these advantages intact. And here's the best part. It doesn't affect your ACA or Medicare premiums, and it's not counted towards your Social Security taxation threshold. For a surviving spouse managing compressed brackets and rising healthcare costs, this is one of the best tools available. This next strategy is not just about managing the source of income, it's a way to actually increase the income for yourself or your surviving spouse. Social Security benefits are determined by years worked, income history, and when you claim the benefit. It may be that you need both yours and your spouse's benefits during retirement, but if you can delay the higher earner's benefits to age 70, this could change the math for the surviving spouse. When one spouse passes, the surviving spouse receives the higher of the two benefits. Postponing Social Security until 70 makes that benefit significantly larger. More income doesn't solve all problems, but more income does give the surviving spouse options. And options matter when you're navigating financial stress alone. If you're planning to sell a significant asset like your primary residence to downsize or a vacation property, any appreciated investment, the timing of that sale matters enormously. In the year of a spouse's death, you're still filing jointly. Capital gains treatment under joint filing is far more favorable than that under single. If that sale happens while both spouses are living or in the year of death rather than the year after, you may save a substantial amount in taxes. This is the kind of decision a couple can make together or a surviving spouse can act in on time. Both make a real difference. If you're 70 and a half or older and you give to charity, this next strategy is worth knowing about. A qualified charitable distribution lets you donate directly from your IRA to a qualified charity, up to $105,000 a year, and that donation satisfies your required minimum distribution without counting as taxable income, meaning no IRMAA trigger and less taxation on your Social Security. For a single filer with charitable intent, this is one of the most efficient tools available. Every one of these strategies works better, sometimes dramatically better, when both spouses are alive and filing jointly. That's the window, and that's exactly why this conversation needs to happen now, not after something happens. The widow's penalty is real, it's structural, and it hits at the worst possible moment, but it's also plannable when you understand the mechanism and what to do about it. Diversify your retirement income sources, keep your taxable income low, and sell large assets while you're still filing jointly. If you're under 65, you're navigating more than just taxes. You're also paying more for health insurance. Healthcare costs can quietly unravel everything you've built. And that's why I've put together a free healthcare guide specifically for early retirees covering that 55 to 65 window. What it actually costs, what your real options are, and how to plan for it. The link is below. And if you want to go deeper on Roth conversions, because that strategy deserves its own dedicated video, that one is right here. I'll see you there.